Hello, people. I still haven't come up with any nickname for you guys. It's 12 people on average. Thanks for sticking around. Today, I will be reviewing The Hundred Years' War on Palestine, a history of settler colonial conquest and resistance from 1917 to 2017. It's a historical account by a Palestinian historian named Rashid Khalidi. Basically, the conflict from the Palestinian perspective. It starts from the creation of the Zionist movement and into the current day where we are here, where people are being dispossessed and genocided. So the book recounts the past 100 years of Palestinian history under Zionism and colonialism under the British Mandate. One thing that really hit me was that the Zionist idea towards Palestinians, how similar it is towards the British ideas of the Indians, and how they think that they are making the place they colonized better somehow. There was a quote that was mentioned that I kind of lost in its pages, so okay, I found it. Where was I? I was surprised to find the similarities between the ideas of settlers towards the Palestinians, so similar to the British colonials of the Indians that they colonized. So there was this quote of the British Viceroy, Lord Curzon, whatever, I don't care. To feel that somewhere among these millions you have left a little justice or happiness or prosperity, a sense of manliness or moral dignity, a spring of patriotism, a dawn of intellectual enlightenment, or a stirring of duty where it did not before exist. That is the Englishman's justification in India. The words "where it did not before exist" bear repeating for Curzon and others of his colonial class. The natives did not know what was best for them and could not achieve these things on their own. You cannot do this thing without us, Curzon said in another speech. For over a century, the Palestinians have been depicted in precisely the same language by their colonizers as have been other indigenous people. The condescending rhetoric of Theodor Herzl and other Zionist leaders was no different from that of their European peers. The Jewish state, Herzl wrote, would form a part of wall of defense for Europe and Asia, an outpost of civilization against barbarism. This was similar to the language used in the conquest of North American frontier, which ended in 19th century with the eradication or subjugation of the continent's entire native population, as in North America. The colonization of Palestine, like that of South Africa, Australia, Algeria, and other parts of East Africa, was meant to yield a white European settler colony. The same tone toward the Palestinians that characterizes both Curzon's rhetoric and Herzl's letter is replicated in much of the discourse on Palestine in the United States, Europe, and Israel even today. That thing was so eye-opening for me because I genuinely didn't notice such. Like, I have argued with Zionists online, and yes, they tend to have this similar, not same, perspective on Arabs and other people of color, that is. It just made so much sense to me, I was flabbergasted. Then the book also over and over refutes the Zionist propaganda of a land without a people and a people without a land. One of the 8.5 million people who were living there before Zionism. It just wasn't a desert, and they kind of justified it as them being some like traveling Bedouins without any link to the land itself, and the land being some desert, isolated and crumbling or something. And then suddenly the settlers went there, and it's blooming with fountains of rivers and whatnot. I don't know. Uh, cities, bustling cities with economies, and that rhetoric is so dangerous because it strips the Palestinians of their identity. One other tactics would be that there wasn't, and the Jews actually belonged to that land historically, but Palestinian Jews already existed, them being 6%, so moving on. The book actually just uses a very academic language, and it tends to ignore, it's not ignore, but like sanitize the words that would be very gory and very I just don't know. It's there is so much violence against the Palestinians and sometimes also against the Israeli civilians that the book, like sanitizing it, it just kind of took something out of it. It just took some soul out of it, in my opinion. Which is why I rated it 4.5 stars or 4 stars instead of 5 stars. Okay, so at the beginning, checking my notes because it's history, but at the beginning, we learned that when the settlers started to come in during the Balfour Declaration, where it all began, kind of, the Palestinians didn't even know that their lands and their homes had been signed away to the settlers. 2 whole days after the signing that happened, they weren't aware at all because the British mandate, right? They strictly censored the local newspapers, so the word had to travel from mouth to mouth from Egypt, Iraq, Syria, etc. What? Egyptians, like the travelers, had to literally carry newspapers from Egypt into Palestine for people to know that their country had been signed away. And the Palestinians or the Arabs weren't even mentioned in the declaration itself, and they basically said that indigenous people would be tolerated with civilian and human rights, although they are not right now, but okay. They would be tolerated, but it didn't say anything of national rights or right to political representation or anything. And that is how they made a Jewish state. My phone is overheating. Oh my goodness, okay. I'm gonna make it quick. And that is how they kind of justified the making of a Jewish state with Arab and Muslim majority by 90%. Ah, my phone is lagging! It's getting too hot. It usually doesn't happen. Why is it happening? Oh my goodness. And for years and years, the Palestinians had to go through their voices being suppressed on the international and national stage through official suppressing and through back channels and assassination. Israelis, however, even though it might be far-fetched, but the Israel itself linked itself to the ancient kingdom of Judea, and omitting the fact that Jews already existed in Palestine. I'm just gonna, and all the Jewish artifacts recovered in Palestinian land does not solidify Israeli claim to the land. It simply uncovers Jewish history. On the other hand, Palestinians who have lived here for generations, centuries, if not millennia, are reluctant to perceive that even though that Israelis have immigrated mostly from Europe, some have been here for a generation, blah blah blah, linked to themselves. You know what? I'm just gonna so it brings up a lot of common discussions of the Palestine-Israel conflict. There is also a common contention between the opposite sides that the Palestine was simply a province of the Ottoman Empire, and it isn't a legitimate state. Although there has been maps of Palestine in the Roman era. Although yes, the Roman themselves named Judea Palestine. Regardless, it was an Ottoman province for nearly 400 years, and the collective trauma and of the people being dispossessed and, well, ethnically genocided, it created shared identity that came to be known as the Palestinian identity, and that is how usually a separate identity forms in history. That's literally nothing new. Palestinian narrative also kind of ignores that although the majority of the Jewish settlers came from European countries and used to be and are settlers, but they have linked themselves to this ancient land that through that 2,000-year-old land of Judea. And although Judaism is a religion, they have formed a national identity through Israel now, through 70 years and a couple of generations. And now the point of contention between them is two national identities fighting for the same land. The book concludes that sustainable peace cannot be achieved unless both Palestinians and Israelis get their full rights without sieges on Gaza, without genocide, and without an apartheid. While we're talking about equal rights, it also bears saying that it also includes the right to a national identity, a right to representation. That's basically how it concludes, and I would definitely recommend checking this out. My brain is short-circuiting along with my phone. It's just such a dense topic with like 100 years of history, and it's all the facts are kind of jumbling out my mind, and there is a lot I can say. A lot. I could literally narrate the whole book to you, and I could, and then still say more. Which is why I plead you to read the book for yourself and think critically about what you know of the current topic. Link down below of friends Lou's video of why we need to read diversely, and it is a very well thought out video, unlike my own. So check that out and see ya.